What is up everyone, my name is Sahil and I am a second year UBC Medical School student, and in today's video I'll be interviewing a med colleague who did her medical school in Poland, and we'll be talking to her about her medical school journey. But before that, let's cue the intro. Alright, and welcome back. If this is the first video that you're watching of mine, I want to say a big thank you and welcome to our YouTube channel. On this channel, I like to make medicine-related vlogs, health and fitness videos, travel vlogs, and other fun videos just like this one. Now, if you haven't already, please do make sure to go smash that like button and the subscribe button, because I would really like that, and I feel like that would motivate me to keep doing more videos and lets me know that you guys are enjoying videos like this. And with that being said, I do want to mention that this video podcast series, Ask the Student, is available on all podcast platforms. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, Radio Public, and everywhere else where you guys listen to your podcasts. So for today's video podcast, I have a very amazing guest. Her name is Romina. She's a resident doctor practicing in UBC Vancouver, completing her first or second year of residency. We'll find out in a little bit. And she actually did her medical school in Poland and was able to match back into Canada, specifically UBC. So I think it'll be really exciting talking to her about her journey, what kind of factors she considered when picking a medical school in Poland, and how it was matching back into UBC. Now, before we begin the interview, I do want to mention that anything Romina and I discuss in this video podcast are thoughts and experiences of our own. We're not speaking on behalf of any med school or any med admissions committee, and I want to really clarify and really emphasize that. These are experiences of our own that we want to share with you guys and kind of just assist pre-meds on their journey, and I hope at least one of you finds it helpful. With that being said, let's begin today's video podcast. Let's go. Thank you so much for being here, Romina. I really appreciate you taking time out for today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so my understanding is that you are a resident doctor practicing in Vancouver, and that you did your medical school in Poland. Is that correct?
That's all correct, yes.
Awesome. So I thought we'd get right into it. I'm sure a lot of people are curious, but you want to just talk a little bit about your experience getting into medical school and what that journey's looked like coming back into Vancouver as well?
So I'm originally from North Vancouver. So super grateful to have match back in North Vancouver as well, serving the same community that I grew up in. So I couldn't be any more grateful. But my journey towards medicine was an interesting one for sure. So I wanted to become a physician since I was 5 years old. My mom's not here to verify it, but I swear, which is interesting because when you're 5, there's definitely no profound reason of wanting to become a doctor. I don't know what drew me into it, but interestingly enough, it never changed. As I got older and as I became older and I understood more about what physicians do and how they help other people, that really drew me into it, and intellectual stimulation of studying medicine and all of those things. So I always tell people I never had a profound moment or an aha moment of why I wanted to go into medicine. But it was a mixture of all these different things growing up. So I always knew I was going to go in to medical school. But at the end of high school, I mean, you follow me on Instagram, so you know I'm a huge foodie. I love everything to do with food. And so when I was in high school, I was cooking and baking a lot, and loved the culinary arts and all of that as well. And when I graduated high school, I started a blog called Small Girl Big Plate, and it was just an outlet for my friends and my family. At that time, it was never meant to be anything, but back then there wasn't anything called a food blogger, or there was just a few other people doing it in the city. It wasn't what it is now. So this blog became this big thing that I wasn't ready for, which was hilarious. But I just rode that wave and I loved it. So I did that for 2 years. I was essentially eating at restaurants and writing about it, and had such a good 2 years. It was the best job ever. It was so much fun. But then after, the 2 years, I was like, okay, had a great time. This is not forever. Best memories, but now I'm going to go off to medical school. And my family, a lot of people don't know this, my family's half Polish on my stepfather's side. So I grew up with Polish people for the majority of my life. And on my stepdad's side, a lot of our family members graduated from the medical school that I went to. So I knew for a very long time I was going to go to that medical university, and I applied to one school and one school only, and it was there. And then I packed up one suitcase, booked a one-way flight, and then I left for
And the rest is history.
And the rest is history. Is best experience, but simply put, that's what the journey was like.
So really, just because of the family side of it, right? Because you're from your dad's or grandparents from Poland, so you wanted to connect back with the roots pretty much, and to see what that area was like.
Yeah, so my stepdad is from Poland, and so their side of the family studied at a medical university. There was a lot of factors. One was when you go to Europe, you go after high school, right? So you don't do the undergrad, system, you don't do the MCAT system, and all that kind of stuff. And also, you got to live in the heart of Europe, and it's much cheaper. I think my 6 years of education probably would be equivalent to what 2 years is like for somebody living in Vancouver with their expenses. So lots of factors combined and together. Now, I was very young. I think I had my 20th birthday just a few months after I had got to Poland. So I didn't, when I look back on where I would study now, now that I've gotten older and I've lived through it, there's a lot of things I would have done differently. I mean, my school was very, very European based. So about, I would say 95% of the students were Swedish. They were from Sweden, and then, 3% were German and 1% Norwegians. And like, I would say probably 0.5% were North American. So when you go to a school which is completely European tailored, it's hard for you to come back home, right? Because we don't have any USMLE or Canadian board exam preps or anything like that. So if I was going to go back, I always advise people choose a school which is very North American tailored. Like there's other schools in Poland or Ireland or Australia, those kind of institutions which will help you prepare to come back home, because my school didn't do any of that. I was literally Reddit forming at one point, trying to navigate myself through the system because there wasn't support in that.
Mm-hmm. So just to clarify, did you ever consider applying to UBC Medicine?
Yeah, there was points after high school where I contemplated, staying here, doing the undergrad system. But then again, there was a lot of factors to that, right? It was, a 4-year program, a minimum 4-year program, and then the MCAT, and then all the competition here as well, and then the expenses. So that was definitely something I considered. It wasn't that I just packed up my bags and I left without considering what my home had to offer as well. But when everything came together, what was best for me was to go abroad. And that's what I did. But I mean, that comes with its own risks and challenges as well. And I always tell people this, I'm like, you pay your price at some point, right? You either pay your price and you do the grind initially where you do your undergrad and your MCAT and you beat the competition, you get into medicine here, or you go abroad, which it's easier to get into, but it's much harder to come back. So then you do your board exams and your licensing and all that. So at some point you pay your price. It just depends on if it's initially or if it's more at the end of your journey.
That's a great point. And speaking on that, I actually brought up a statistic from the CARMS, the statistics that they released for 2020. And I was looking at it, and they said that there's 1,426 applicants who are international medical graduates who are applying to family medicine spots. And out of that, only 456 students got selected or picked. That's a close to 32% selection rate. So yeah. I feel like those odds are better than applying to UBC Medical School or any Canadian medical school for that matter, where the odds of getting in, I think, is close to like 6%. I don't remember the statistics for UBC specifically, but I think they have an incoming class of close to 280 students, and close to 3,000 students apply every year, sometimes even more. So if we were to look at it from a statistics point of view, it seems like it'd be better to kind of just go abroad and then try to match back. What do you think?
I don't know if I fully agree with it.
Okay, yeah, totally. I love the disagreement.
I mean, we have to understand we're looking at just family medicine spots. Like if you drop those statistics for any other specialty, you're not going to have, that 30% match rate. And every year with CARMS really differs as well, right? But I mean, if you're going to be looking at, ortho or derm or any of those specialties, you're probably also looking at a 6% match rate. A lot of the times also the IMG spots aren't actually filled by the program for IMGs either. So there's I think gray zones in the stats as well. But going abroad and coming back home isn't so smooth, and it changes every year as there's new licensing exams, certain exams get taken out, there's new requirements, it does become more competitive. So I think it's not so black and white on if it's easier to go abroad and come home. There's definitely its challenges. I think if you can get in, or you try to get in here, and I think it's almost a better road to go into, because you live in complete uncertainty when you're studying abroad.
That's a great point. Personally, I was also thinking of going abroad as well if I didn't get in the second time around. When I did, I feel like personally applying 2 times was my max. But that being said, there's other students who've applied close to 4 or 5 times and then they get in and they're adherent on that. And I just interviewed AJ, who is another med colleague of mine, who applied 5 times. And that's perseverance. I don't know if I have that in me to do it that many times, but kudos to him and everyone else applying again and again.
I've met a lot of UBC med students who have, applied 4 to 6 times. It's just, I think they appreciate that, right? It just shows who really, really wants it. And I think that eventually, if you're working on yourself, as those years come by, that's something that's not going to go unnoticed, right? I mean, it's not 100% you're going to get in, but I feel like there comes a point where UBC is like, okay, you really want this and you're working hard, and they might give, that leeway in some situations. But I know I'm at Sound, and when I hear the UBC med students who are like, I've done, an undergrad and a master's and, saved the world. And then I finally got in on my side. Like, you're great.
Tons of stories about that. And going back to your experience being in Poland, what was that like? So you spent close to 6 years there, is that correct?
Yeah, probably a little bit more or less from, when I moved there, by the time I moved back home. It was amazing. I mean, I spent my 20s in Poland. So really the years, my developmental years, so much of who I am is because of that country. I think I grew the most there. I was super uncomfortable when I got there because I barely spoke the language. I'm in the heart of Eastern Europe. There are lots of cultural differences. It's freaking cold. But I had an amazing 6 years. Like I have my days where I'm like, I would love to just go back there for a week and come back. It's like my second home for me. We were in a 6-year program. So 3 years were basic sciences, and then 3 years were clinicals, because usually the students there don't have an undergrad. And it was a little bit more, sometimes I always say it's a bit of a more fierce system when you're studying in Poland. You got that hard Eastern European mentality where, they'll call out your grades in front of everybody in the classroom. And
really?
You grow really, really thick skin. Oh, for sure.
Wow.
For sure. It's not, So it's a little bit like that, but overall, just I had an incredible time. But then again, as I told you before, for IMGs who are listening to this and considering what schools to go to, I always say, please do your research and choose a school that's North American tailored, because, I had to go to another city to get, my USMLE prep course going and stuff like that. And also, when I was at my CARM interview, I interviewed around Canada, and every single interview I was at, I was the only one from Poland at those interviews. Now, there's no way there's nobody else from Poland. I mean, we're all in different cohorts interviewing on different days, but everybody who I interviewed with that I met was from Ireland, Australia, or the Caribbean. So there's definitely a preference on where the students are studying. And usually they like when you go to an English-speaking country and they have residents from those countries, so they understand the standard of education. So if you're, sometimes they don't know about your school and what the level of education is. So I always say, go to a school in a country that'll be more recognized. But overall, very good experience.
Oh, that's awesome. And I know you're a big foodie as well. Was there lots of different foods there that like not really available here too much? Polish food?
Well, yeah, I mean, I always complain, like, where's the Eastern European food in Vancouver? What is this? So I went to a Ukrainian restaurant a week ago, Kozak,
Mhm.
which was really good. But I'm still trying to find a Polish restaurant. I mean, I know there's Polish stores, which I'll go and get my breads and my pierogies and that kind of stuff. But so sad. Maybe I'll open my own.
That would be cool. Wow. Are you ever
uh,
considering starting the food blog again?
I have no time.
Uh, I totally could
I
see that.
I definitely, I think my perspective has changed as well. I mean, when I had started Small Girl Big Plate, I, it was completely, double chocolate brownies with salted caramel, pretzels, and all this kind of stuff. Whereas now, after medical school, my diet has changed a lot. And living in Europe, it's much more clean and simplified.
Mhm.
So I have a new website where I started to share more nutritious and healthy, mostly plant-based recipes. But the reality of it in first year residency is that I just don't have time to work on it. So I just, whenever I cook something, I try to share the steps on Instagram and have people follow it along rather than, yeah, I just don't have the time. I'm so proud of you for all that you do. I'm always like, this guy can balance it all. So good for you.
Oh, it only appears that way. I try my best, and I feel like I'm getting overwhelmed as well. And I'm not even in third year yet, so I'd imagine when I get into my clinical years, I'll be even more busy. But it's nice connecting with other med students and other doctors and residents as well, because it's like you see other people who are doing so much, like yourself, and you get inspired, which I always do, and then you get motivated to do more. So I always say, hustle inspires hustle, because when you see someone hustling, and you're like, okay, if they can do it, maybe I can pick up on traits that they're following and try to replicate those in myself. They're good qualities. And then you try to do that, and then you hustle. And then who knows, maybe you're going to inspire someone else as well. So it's like a cycle. It's contagious.
I 100% agree. I always say your Instagram following should be like fuel from what you're seeing every day. It should inspire you. You should follow people that put out that hustle that's going to motivate you to hustle yourself. So I always tell people, be selective on who you follow.
Right. Exactly. That's a great point. Shift difference in the quality of education, because we're talking about like different things that students might know and might not know. As a second year student, I'm always forgetting things in the clinic, and like obviously I don't know that much, but I feel like the preceptors are often very kind about that. Is there a difference in the quality of education, you would say?
Quality of education of studying abroad
versus here, peers who've done medical school in Canada?
I think it depends on where you study, to be honest. I think there's a different caliber at each institution. I think IMGs are usually very fact heavy. I mean, they're very good at, knowing etiologies and management of diseases, because we've done so many board exams. Like I've done 7 board exams. So if you're going to give me a disease, I can probably give you a few facts about it. But we didn't study in the system. So where we lack is around navigation. It takes us time to speed up. How to navigate through the EMRs, how to navigate through the hospitals, how to present to preceptors, because everybody has different methods at their medical school, right? So I think that's where the IMGs lack, but they just need a little bit of time to catch up. But in terms of, the level of education, I'm not sure because I didn't go to UBC Medical School. But I feel as though, if your school is recognized, you've met people from your university who have successfully matched, you're probably safe to go there.
Interesting. Okay. In regards to advice for anyone who's listening or watching, who's considering to go abroad and study, do you have any advice for those students?
First, make sure the school is recognized by Canada. So not every medical school is recognized. So there's actually, I don't know the website on the top of my head, but there's a website where you search the institution and you'll see if you can actually study there and come back home. So that's the first thing. The second thing, again, I would see where the students are from, the majority of them. I choose a university which is mostly North American based, because that the courses will be tailored for you to match back home, and they'll help you with the exams and perhaps may even have funding for you to do some of that stuff. The third thing, I'd know the stats when I'd go. So I know that, there's a possibility you might not match back home. So what's your plan 2 going to be? And my last advice is to get, board exams are important. Like you have to score high. For instance, for family medicine and math, you're not even going to get an interview for Ontario unless you score 80% or 85%. I can't remember what it was on your board exam. But after that, no one's ever going to ask you about scores again. So that just becomes on who you are as a person. So I always tell people, because everybody just studies, but in your interview, they're going to ask you, what do you do for fun? What do you do for your community? And that kind of stuff. So try to be engaged and active. Volunteering is huge, and research as well.
Right. So just like be a human still, right? Enjoy the process and don't just focus on studying only.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like for a lot of these places, if you got an interview, they know you're smart. They just want to see if they can work with you for the next 4 years.
Totally.
So keep up with your hobbies and the things that you love, because that's not just going to make you happy, but it's also, you're going to speak about it during your interviews as well.
And that's the biggest advice I've been getting from residents as well, just for different specialties that I'm considering. Everyone says that the interview and the reference letters are obviously very important, but the interview is when the residents get to speak to you and get to hear and figure out if they want to spend the next 2, 3, maybe 5 years with you or not.
Totally.
Yeah,
It's so true. It's funny because when I was in medical school, I started 2 small businesses, and I started an English school and a juice company. And in almost every one of my interviews, except for the UBC one, because I was an MMI, they asked me about my juice business, which is just, it was at the end of my resume. But that's what they chose one of my questions to be about, because they thought it was probably something out of the ordinary and neat, and something that would, showed my interests. But they didn't ask about my research in that interview. They asked about my juice business. So I always give that as an example. So do the things that you love and that are unique, because they're going to come up and they're going to remember you after for it as well.
Wow, that's so cool. You mentioned, so you literally started 2 businesses while in school, eh?
Yeah, it helped me pay for a lot of my expenses.
I've never heard of that before. I mean, I run like a personal training business, but that is difficult in itself. But starting a juice company and then also an English school, is that correct?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah, so it was funny because I didn't intend to do the English school. So one day I was sitting in Starbucks and I was on the phone speaking, and this older man comes up to me and he goes, "Excuse me, like, your English is great. Where are you from?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm from Canada." He's like, "Look, like, I'm preparing for this job. Can you please teach me? Like, I need to better my English." I'm like, "Oh, sir, like, I go to the medical school here. Like, I'm not an English teacher. I've never taught. I don't know how to teach." She's like, "No, that's okay. We just need to converse." And I'm like, okay. So I'd meet him an hour a week at Starbucks, and then I started teaching his wife. And then I learned how to teach English, because just because you speak the language doesn't actually mean that you can teach it. And so I taught myself, and then the wife's friend, and then eventually I had this whole panel of clients that I would teach every week. I didn't have much of a social life, but I got to learn how to do something new, and I got to make money out of it. But eventually I had too many people that I could handle. So I started Moretti School of English. So it was my first business, and I hired expats in Poland. So people from Ireland, England, North America. And I'd find them clients, and then they would teach from our office, and then they'd give me a portion of each of their earnings, and that would run the school, and then they would have a fun side gig to do in Poland. But that's how that started, all from that one man approaching me. But I actually continued it all the way up until I matched, and then the pandemic happened, and I started residency, and then shut the doors. But it was really, really good years doing that. A good growth experience.
Amazing. Bless that guy who met you that day.
Bless that guy. I know.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lastly, Romina, there's one question I'd like to ask all of our podcast guests. It's, given today's digital world with the pandemic and everything, obviously it's difficult for students to stay motivated and keep going with their studying, regardless of if they're pre-med, med students, or even high school students for that matter. But is there any tip that you have that you'd recommend to students that they can start implementing just to keep themselves motivated and persevere towards their goals?
I think you just got to push through it. I think everything is transient, everything eventually passes. And I think that when you're in kind of that stage of defeat, or, you know, everything's kind of crappy around you, it does pass. And in those moments, it's really the test of your sacrifice and your will and your dedication. So I always just say, just push a little harder. It's going to pass eventually. My biggest motivation for me throughout entire medical school and matching back was, I think people think that their dreams and their goals are really personal. But the reality is that 1,000 other people want exactly what you want. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I always remember that there's 1,000 other people who want exactly what I want. And that really, really drives me and motivates me and makes me work on days where I don't want to work, because it comes down to, you know, who sacrificed the most, who was the most dedicated. That's who most often gets, you know, their end goal. But also just little tips. Breaks are so important, right? I mean, I always used to study for 50 minutes, and then I'd have a timer on my watch, and I'd get up and I'd walk around and do something for 10 to 15 minutes. So breaking things up to more manageable and realistic sections and try to do everything in one day. And then making time every week to do things that you love will also help you as well. But I think really what's important is that this period that we're in now eventually is going to pass, and things will get back to normal.
That's beautiful.
So I hope that was a decent advice.
It was amazing advice, and I'm sure everyone watching this is going to implement that, and I hope they will. And if they do, and if you guys do these things and you're motivated, please make sure to comment down below and let us know as well. I think that's everything. Romina, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you want to mention?
No, I always just say, you know, I'm always more than happy to help any of the IMGs out and the CMGs, but IMGs, you know, I think they have a hard time navigating. I definitely did too. I always give out, you know, my phone number, and I do calls with them to help them. So, you know, anybody listening to this who needs help navigating, more than happy, just send me a message.
Awesome. And we'll make sure to include your Instagram. Do you want to be contacted via Instagram or email?
Yeah, I think Instagram's okay.
Okay, sounds good. We'll make sure to link that in the YouTube description box, and also the podcast description box as well, awesome. So that they can reach out to you.
Awesome. So nice to meet you.
Yes, thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Bye. Thank you.
See you. Bye.
And welcome back. I hope you guys really enjoyed watching and listening to that video podcast. Before we end, I do want to mention and say a big thank you to everyone who's been watching and listening to these video podcasts and this whole YouTube channel and supporting us from the beginning. I feel like I'm slowly seeing our subscriber count go up and the views go up, and it really means a lot to me. If you know someone who could find these videos beneficial and would benefit from watching or listening to the advice that we give in these videos, please do make sure to go and share that video with them, because I mean, sharing is caring, and it's kind of a nice gesture to just show that you care about that person by sharing a video with them that maybe might benefit them. And who knows, maybe that's something that they were struggling or thinking about and struggling with, and now you solved the problem. Tons of blessings to you. And with that being said, I hope you guys really enjoyed today's video podcast. If there's anyone else on this video podcast series that you would like to listen to and see, please do make sure to comment them down below, and I'll make sure and do my best to contact them and get them onto the channel, hopefully in the foreseeable future. And with that being said, I wish you guys lots and lots and lots of love, peace, and gains. Hey, love, peace, love. Oh, I messed it up. I don't know how that happened. Okay, let's try that again. I hope you guys have a beautiful day and evening, and tons of peace, love, and gains for you.
I'm from mom and dazzle, down the ground like gravel, coming back around like lasso, macro, like a vision board I see with clarity. I hustle like my name is Gary V, for more than the wealth and prosperity. Accountants was talking about equity, I'm Triple H giving the pedigree. And being I'm special, my specialty. I'm putting in the work till I'm dirt in the earth, I'm moving furniture to Beverly.